Everything's tracked nowadays. Could using a fitness tracker like this one make your life just perfect and solve all your problems? Or could it make everything worse and send you into the pits of despair from whence you will never return? Well, I have some thoughts on that. For pretty much the last decade, I've been using different kinds of fitness trackers. I started with Fitbit, I've used Apple, I've used Garmin, and for the better part of the last year, I was tracking non-stop every single day. But this video is about an experiment I did where I spent 30 days not tracking anything. No watch, no scales, no nothing. Let me tell you what I learned. Don't forget to hang around for my conclusion at the end. Alright, so before I go into my current model, I want to talk about the different types of trackers that I've used in the past. First one is going to be Fitbit. Now, I unfortunately don't have any of the Fitbits because being a minimalist, I let them go. I started with a Charge 2 HR, which was just the first charge model that Fitbit made that tracked heart rate, and I actually moved all the way up through the charge models eventually to the Ionic model, which was one of the first that included music playing and storage, things like that. And a couple of quick things that I can say for the Fitbits: they definitely have really, really good sleep tracking. They have really, really good weatherproofing, and they have a fantastic app. Those are the main strengths of Fitbit that I've seen so far. After I moved on from Fitbit, I decided I wanted to go into a little more smartwatch territory, not so much fitness trackers, so I got an Apple Watch SE. Now, some of the things I like about the Apple Watch, they're pretty, which was also a downside because I felt like I was constantly going to break it. Again, I'm pretty good weatherproofing, but it is more of a smartwatch than it is a fitness tracker, so it lacked a lot of the sport-specific things I was looking for. And lastly, the Solo Loop and the accessories. I just have to mention that because the Solo Loop is probably one of the coolest watch bands I've ever seen. I love the concept, and I wish other companies would adopt something like that. Solo Loop, for those who don't know, was basically a silicone band that attached on both sides of the watch that was custom fit to your hand. So there was no kind of tightening down or stuff like that. You just stretched it, slipped it on, it was in place. And for me, that actually got in the way the least of any of the watch bands I've ever used. Now, why did I move to Garmin? And I want to mention, there's a lot of other trackers out there beyond Garmin, so these are just the ones I have experience with. And I moved to Garmin because I wanted to get a little more away from the smartwatch side of things, a little more into serious fitness tracking. Now, first things first, it stands out about Garmin: the battery life. I can literally travel with a Garmin and not have to charge it during the entire trip. Now, I want to point out, some people might take like 3-4 week long trips or more. In situations like that, yeah, you probably want to bring a charger even for a Garmin. But if you're like me, I work full time, I generally only take trips of about a week or less on any given time. It's really nice to not have to pack a very specialty, phone charger, or it's very nice to not have to pack like a specialty watch charger alongside all the other chargers I have to bring. Now, the other thing I really like about the Garmins, and I've had a Garmin, I moved up to a Fenix 6S, and I currently use a Forerunner, I believe this is a 965. They are durable, very durable. Especially, I can note these last two, I'll occasionally accidentally smack them into the molding on the walls or something like that, and they leave a dent in the molding, but it doesn't affect the watch at all. And I've taken all of them climbing, I've scraped them against rock and things like that. Now, I gotta caution you, right? You scrape them against something like quartz, it probably still could damage it. I do put screen protectors on them. I just think that's a smart idea given the expense of these watches, but they are extremely durable. And the thing I like the most about the Garmins is they have the most tracking, especially the newest models. They'll track disc golf, it tracks paddleboarding, it tracks indoor climbing, bouldering, outdoor climbing. If I do it, it probably has some form of tracking for it. And that's exactly what I was looking to them for. All right, so what are the major takeaways I have from 30 days without tracking? Well, first things first, just a generally lower stress. At least this is a perceived stress level, obviously, because I'm not tracking it. But I feel less stressed because I'm not stressing about the numbers. And as far as the running goes, well, I'll show you a quick clip from me running.
2 weeks in to going without a watch, and today is the first chance we've had to do a long run because of all the rain and craziness with the weather. And to be completely honest with you, I feel like I'm having an easier time keeping my heart rate down. I've been able to maintain conversational pace for basically the first feels like about 2 miles. I know this trail pretty well, so I'm gonna say 2 miles. But so far so good. I'm just watching the heart rate, but let's say stuck with the stress.
And as you can see from that clip, I'm not struggling with pace as much. You know, I was able to pull off a 10K on one of those weekends and didn't really struggle. You know, I knew when to walk, I knew when to run, to keep everything in that kind of zone 2 space. That was really important to me. The other thing that I noticed, the third point I would make here, is that climbing was a lot easier because there was no watch band in the way. And those who have been climbing for a minute, you're probably aware that you don't just use your hands, right? Sometimes you put your forearms on something to make it stick or against the wall. And having these little pieces of metal, well, I mean, they don't get too badly damaged. You can see even the black paint's still there, but it does get in the way a little bit. And that brings me to point number 4, which is that it's just a lot less cumbersome in all the activities. You know, if I'd go to the regular gym, I was so used to start the workout, track the reps, make sure the reps track correctly, make sure the weight tracked correctly, go through all this stuff. Now you might ask yourself, well, how are you tracking otherwise? Notes on my iPhone. I just wrote down the weights and the set numbers now. And if I go up in weight, great. I just mark that on the Notes app and we're done. Makes it a little bit simpler. But this happens a lot, you know, same with the running, having to start the run, or, oh, did the run start correctly? Did I get my GPS lock? Disc golf I've always been terrible at tracking with. I feel like I've never once played a game where I tracked it correctly on the Garmin. I do want to point out here, by the way, as a side note and credit to Apple, I was able to successfully track games with Apple's Apple Watch SE, because that app integrated, I believe it's the U-Disc app, and that made it a lot nicer to track. Unfortunately, Garmin, it does have a U-Disc app, but it has a separate disc golf tracking, which means you kind of have to choose. You either get the calories credit or you get the game credit, but you can't get them both. And that's a little frustrating. So for me, again, it just took a lot of that friction out of those processes because I was able to just not think about, am I tracking everything correctly? All right, point number 5, no charging. I know that seems a little weird. Garmin's have really long battery life. But the thing you're gonna find with most trackers is that you're gonna want to charge them while you're in the shower. It just makes it easy because you don't want to charge them overnight if you want to track your sleep, which means that, you know, if you take quick showers, a Garmin's long battery life allows you to charge simply during that time, put it back on, and it stays at 100% more or less throughout the week. That's really, really important. The other thing I would say here is I really thought it's something that was going to come up for me was not having notifications, you know, things like that, not having the time on my wrist. And not having time there, it sounds frustrating, right? I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, what would I do without a watch? Well, funny thing, there's clocks everywhere. It's really strange. You realize how many clocks are all over the world, right? Everything has a clock. My kitchen has like 3 of them. I don't know why. There's 3 different clocks in the kitchen alone. Every device I use, you know, my computer has one, my phone has one, my iPad has one. Everything has some kind of clock on it. So great. It makes me not really have to worry about that. And as far as the notifications, that's actually turned out to be even better because I check my notifications when I can actually respond. And this has been a little bit tricky for me because, you know, in some watches, it's going to mark a text message as read as soon as it pops up on your watch. And now it looks like you're leaving somebody on red until you can respond to them. And now, again, point to the Apple Watch here. You can respond on the watch, which, hey, that's really cool. But a little distracting, especially if you wear your watch throughout the day and you're working. For me, I push work-life balance a lot, and I also think it's important to be focused on my work while I'm at my work. So if I get a text, I don't necessarily want to interrupt the thing I'm doing and respond to it. And not having the watch means that it stays on the phone, it stays on red, which is the reality, I didn't read it, and I can then come back to that person, not look like I left them on red, and respond appropriately when I have time to do so. So that's actually a little bit of a freeing aspect to it. All right, continuing the major takeaways. What are some really great things that happened during this 30-day period? I lost 3 pounds. 3? That's not 3. 3 pounds. That surprised me a little bit. I was not actually expecting to lose weight, but I did continue the exact same process that I was doing for the 30 days prior to it. That way I wasn't changing a lot of variables, because that's not fair to going 30 days without tracking. The other interesting thing I noticed, all my weights on my gym workouts. Now, I only really hit the actual gym about once a week on a given week, but all of my weights went up. Anywhere between 10 to 30 pounds. Squat definitely went up a lot. That was probably my best one during this time period. And again, that was really surprising to me. Now, something I will mention here is that I did take a lot of time to just get excessive amounts of protein in during this whole process. So I know that helped. But still, that was a very surprising result. All right, my point number 9, and this, I don't feel like it was controversial, but based on recent experience, it is controversial. My climbing grade improved. Now, I got a note here that I've had a pulley injury throughout most of this time period, and it is recovering. It's going quite well, actually, to the point where I feel a lot stronger. So that's a big deal. And number 10, also, I'm sure, extremely controversial to the world of the internet. My running comfort increased. I don't want to say times increased because I wasn't timing it, so I don't know. But what I can tell you is that I know from my own experience that I was able to stay at a comfortable pace for longer. I didn't have to stop and run as much on the same tracks. And again, I don't think this is a factor just of not tracking, but this is an advantage of the less stress from not tracking, is that I'm able to just go a little bit further without having to walk. I'm able to keep that heart rate down a little bit longer and get in those kind of zone 2 long, like steady state cardio. It's important. All right, now I want to talk about what happened when I started tracking again, because I definitely found issues. Now, I'm going to talk about later who I recommend this for, so hang around through that part, hear me out through this space. So first things first, I have a lot of issues with the stats when I started tracking again. The first and most obvious issue is the training readiness score, right? So I'm going to show you a couple of different training readinesses. This one right here, this is the training readiness the day after I went climbing at a place called Cliffhangers. Spent a 3-hour session with one of my friends, and we did both ropes and bouldering, and it said I burned a whole bunch, and it put me into overreaching. Now, since it wasn't tracking for 30 days, that's probably why it didn't have my regular load. It wasn't really a problem for me. But here's where it gets really interesting. So that's the day after. Okay, this one are some of my stats the day before I climbed again. Now, this time I was climbing in a bouldering gym, and I climbed some of my strongest stuff yet. Again, still with the injury, I'm not done yet with that. But I was still flashing everything. I had an amazing day, I had a wonderful day, but you'll note that training readiness said 1. And this really kind of bothered me, because if you look at some of the other stats on here, right, like the HRV status, you look at the sleep status, things like that, these don't indicate bad recovery. But I take a lot of issues with these stats. And I want to talk about some of the other issues beyond training readiness. Sleep tracking. Other creators have really talked in depth about this, and I'm going to be honest, I don't have their level of expertise on it. What I can tell you is that I feel like I've been sleeping better, a lot better recently. But the value of this sleep tracking doesn't seem to be there for me, especially because I guess I have a bit of an academic background, right? And these scores go up to 100, so I always want it to get close to 100, and it never does. I'm floating between the high 80s and, low 90s a lot of times. It just doesn't feel as meaningful to me. But on that same track, the recovery time in Garmin is vastly based on these sleep scores and on the regular load. It tells you the factors right in the app. And the thing is, if it's not that accurate with the sleep, that recovery time may not be quite accurate. All right, lastly, heart rate zones. Now, again, if there's somebody, there's a running coach out there that can tell me more about this, hey, I'm all ears, I'm still learning in this space. But what I've found, there's this old rule of conversational pace, right? If you can carry on a conversation comfortably, you're in zone 2, you're in a good space. Well, according to my watch, I can carry on a conversation comfortably in zone 3 very easily. And I feel more comfortable a lot of times at that low end of zone 3 than I do at the high end of zone 2. So for me, I don't know if that heart rate zone is the accuracy issue. I have done this with a heart rate monitor if anybody's worried about accuracy. Yes, I've done it with a chest strap as well as just with the watch itself. And I just want to point out, especially with the Forerunner 965 series, this is within like 1 BPM of the heart rate strap most of the time. It is a very accurate tracker. So that's my issues with accuracy. Let me talk about some of the other takeaways that I've had. So what's happened since I started tracking again beyond my issues with stats? Well, there's added stress. I'm getting stressed out again, to be honest. I wake up and I see that training readiness and it's like, but I was going to do this today, but I was going to do that today. And in the previous version of how I was doing things, I would have just not. I don't think that's really a good way to approach it, to be honest. And I find I can't really do anything with a lot of the information it's giving me. And it's not information that's affecting my decisions either anymore. Like, a lot of the info doesn't give me input on what I should do next or how I should approach things. It used to, but now I'm like, I have reason to doubt the accuracy of a lot of these things, so I'm not necessarily going to listen to it as much. Another really interesting point that came up since I started tracking again is, and I talked about this on the previous video, I hit a volume high with my climbing. And that was a little surprising. Maybe it's because I've been climbing a little more on the ropes prior to that and I'm building up the endurance in the climbing space more. Maybe it's because stuff at that gym was really hard and I was falling off a lot more, so I was giving more goes. That's very possible too. But it makes me kind of question how I track things and how much better I do when I'm not tracking. But the last big takeaway since I started tracking again. So just to be very clear with the audience, I was diagnosed with a variant of COVID-19 in the late December of last year. And after I was diagnosed with that, my VO2 max dropped from 49 to 48. I was able to exercise within about 2 weeks after recovering, and it's interesting because that's pretty much kept through. However, when I stopped tracking for 30 days and I came back, my VO2 max is lower. It went down to 47. Now, is that a long effect from having COVID? Is this a kind of like far-reaching of it? Maybe. I don't have any of the issues with long COVID. I want to mention that right now. But it really makes me wonder, again, on the accuracy and the tracking there. And these trackers are pretty well known to track VO2 max decently, but I wasn't doing anything that could give it a true feel for VO2 max, and that's what worries me a little bit in this space. All right, so I talked about my personal experience, but let's talk about who I would recommend trackers for and who I would not recommend trackers for. Well, first things first, if you are a high-level athlete or you are hitting a plateau, especially in running, tracker can be very beneficial to you because this is going to let you really dig into the numbers. These systems integrate across the board. So you could use Garmin scale. You know, it does a lot of good tracking, although it is an impedance scale, so it's only going through the legs. Just keep that in mind when you're looking at stats on it. But it does track a lot, and it also integrates with like MyFitnessPal or similar calorie tracking apps, so you can really get microscopic about how you do things throughout the day. And if you're somebody that just wants to learn about your stats, you know, you really don't know what stats are about, I don't know what to think about them, then yeah, Garmin especially, and a lot of fitness trackers could really help your understanding of the stats. Another person that will really benefit from a Garmin is people who struggle with pace when running. If you're somebody who just goes out and, you know, you push too hard on every single run, having the watch there to tell you what your heart rate's at, you can even set zone alerts. I have an easy run mode on my tracker right now that allows me to say, oh, you're getting into zone 3, chill out. You know, that can be really helpful for you to keep it down and learn your gears when you're running. That's really important. The other thing that can be really helpful here, maybe you don't want to wear a watch forever, but you want to understand your baseline. Again, wearing a watch for maybe do the opposite of my experiment. Wear a tracker for 30 days, establish a baseline. This helps you understand more of where you're at. And the other kind of person that might benefit from this is somebody who's already getting some value from trackers, especially in the Garmin space. If you want that extra battery life, you want that extra durability, you want to kind of take that next step away from Fitbit or even the Apple devices, because Garmin is just going to go a little bit further. Now, I will comment, I haven't really used the Apple Watch Ultra, but Mark Lewis has a great video comparing that to the Garmin's if you want to check it out. All right, but who should not use a fitness tracker? Well, I'm going to say those who are low on funds. I'm not calling you broke. We all have different levels of money that we can afford. And I'm going to be really honest with you here. You could be a world-class athlete without a tracker. It is possible. So don't feel that just because everybody at your park run has a Garmin that you have to get one as well. For instance, the Garmin I'm wearing right now I think is something to the effect of like $800 or $900 regular retail. That's a steep price. Fitbits are definitely more affordable. The Apple Watch SE is more affordable, and if you prefer those kind of cheaper models, Garmin does have lower end models that don't track as well. I think they just released the 165 model, which is the baseline of their running series, and it's supposed to be really good. Again, they have a lot of great tracking. Another person who's really going to struggle with these watches and any kind of fitness tracking in general are people who get a little obsessed with numbers, to be honest. And that's me. I really get obsessed with the numbers. I think if you have an academic background, right, if you spend a lot of time in academia, or you're one of those people who really like to get A's in every single class, you're going to really struggle with tracking in these numbers because you're going to always want to get the best. And it's very, very, very hard. Plus, the margin of error for a lot of the tracking just means that you never really will get to a perfect 100%. And that can be really frustrating. The other thing about it is that you can start stressing and obsessing over the numbers. And that's definitely why I took my 30-day break to begin with, is I found myself really obsessing over the numbers, and it's like the number kind of determined whether I was going to have a good time or not instead of the activity, and thinking that doesn't make sense. All right, what else? Well, this is a very specific type of person, but if you're somebody who says, oh, I burned 500 calories with this exercise, that means I get to eat 500 more calories. Don't do it. Please do not. And I warn you of this because this is something that I fell into a lot. And it's one of the reasons I struggled with weight for years, because the reality is, there's a lot of great videos out there talking about the calorie tracking has, again, a big margin of error on these. But also, the food you eat doesn't necessarily perfectly equate to the calories. So just because you burned 500 doesn't mean you can eat 500 and baseline. That's not gonna work. Now, I gave a rule earlier on. I kind of do about half the calories, but even that's wiggly rule. The best advice, and I'm not a nutritionist or dietitian or anything like that, but the best thing that's worked for me is to say, I've done some exercise. If it's a lot of cardio, kind of aerobic exercise, I want to make sure I'm getting some carbs in afterwards to replace muscle glycogen stores. If I could pronounce it correctly, that'd be great. And get lots of protein, because protein I'm not worried about storing so much. Carbs, take it easy. Just get a regular serving of carbs in there is fine. So that's why I have to make that point, because if you start looking at these, like for example, yesterday I was climbing at a bouldering gym, and according to Garmin, I burned 1,032 calories. That's a lot of calories. If I had tried to eat my way back through that 1,032 calories, I guarantee you I would have put on weight today. So again, that's another person who should be really careful of this. Let's see, who else? Well, I'm going to be honest. With these trackers, especially with Garmin, if you dislike complexity in your life, right? Or you're the kind of person who is very forgetful of like starting the watch or getting the scale out and weighing yourself every single day, or remembering to charge your watch, or remembering to download the stats, or maybe your mind doesn't really know what to do with all those numbers. Garmin's app is great if you like the numbers, but it's a very complex app. I have seen the newest version of it. They're testing that out on some people, and it does look a little bit cleaner, but it's still a lot of information. I really don't think that for the general populace, especially people who are doing things for fun, that the tracking is necessarily going to be beneficial for you.
All right, I gave a lot of info, so what's my conclusion from all of this? Well, to be honest, I think I'm gonna have to follow the minimalists, and I just don't see it adding value, so let go. What's next? Well, I'm gonna continue to focus on trying to, lean up. I wanna lose body fat. Let's start building a little more muscle mass, and who knows, maybe I'll play a little bit with creatine next. So, did some of my information help you out? Do you have other information that's helped you work with a tracker? Maybe you decided to stop, or maybe you found them really, really helpful. Share it in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm definitely open to all kinds of different ideas. And if you did get some value from this video, please like, subscribe down below. Channel really appreciates it anytime you do that. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.